Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. In the last video, I expanded to the Dune Desert by setting up a few train stations and then a new factory. This one is making 50 Singularity Cells per minute, all of which I thought were going to be used in the upcoming nuclear power plant. The reason this video took so long to come out is that I built this entire factory twice. As I was making the video, I wanted to use Satisfactory Calculator for an additional visual aid. That's when I realized my numbers for everything were off. I accidentally selected the wrong cell when having the spreadsheet do the math. Even though I prefer to look at the spreadsheet of my own making, the online tool ended up saving me tens of hours. If I hadn't got it then, I would have built more of the actual power plant, and who knows when I would have noticed. As painful as it was to redo the factory, it could have been much worse. If I only wanted to make uranium fuel rods, and I was okay with storing the waste, the whole process would be relatively easy. With blueprints, I could quickly build enough storage that would last longer than I'm gonna play this save for. The part that makes nuclear power more complicated is if you want to have zero waste. I personally find the challenge of making Ficsonium fuel rods fun and totally worth the time and effort. There are a lot of pieces to this large puzzle, and it can become overwhelming very quickly. But as they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We start today's video in the Dune Desert. Don't panic, the Singularity Cell factory is still there. I did roll back my save, but not that far. I screwed up so bad that going back in time 26 hours was a better option than mass deleting the factory. The amount of load balancing I did at other factories to get the required parts over here was going to be way too much of a headache to try to adjust. I'd rather just start over. We are currently in my creative save with all the advanced game settings turned on. I'm straight up copying I'm Kibitz and built a little diagram to help show the process. Here is the diagram of everything with satisfactory tools. I'll link this in the comments below if you want to take a look. Let's go through the process. I'm sure I'm going to use my spreadsheet plenty to show you each individual smaller part, but obviously showing you the whole picture, there's just a lot of information on the screen at that point. This right here is going to show how we take 1200 uranium and go all the way to burning Ficsonium fuel rods. You'll notice that the signs in green are the ones that are tied directly to making the fuel rods, whereas the ones that I have left in white are more of like the secondary parts. So let's quickly run through the whole process. I'm going to take 1200 uranium, concrete, and sulfuric acid, combine those into a blender, and that'll make my encased uranium cells. This is also going to give me a byproduct of 240 sulfuric acid per minute. The encased uranium cells then get fed into a manufacturer. I'll need to add electromagnetic control rods and encased industrial beams, and these will create my uranium fuel rods. So as you can see, the very first step in creating just uranium fuel rods, actually pretty easy to do. This will produce 150,000 megawatts of power, and it'll create 600 uranium waste per minute. And thankfully, the waste stacks to 500. So really 600 isn't too bad. But that waste is then going to come over to here. And now we start our blue row, which is going to be plutonium. So first thing you can kind of tell is the uranium waste isn't going into one specific spot. That 600 waste is going to get split. 3/4 are going to get sent to the non-fissile uranium, and 150 will go into the plutonium pellets. I'll just need silica, nitric acid, and more of that sulfuric acid for the non-fissile uranium. Combine it with more waste, and I get the plutonium pellets. Those then go into an assembler, combine it with some more concrete, and that will create 90 encased plutonium cells. And to create the plutonium fuel rods, you're going to need electromagnetic control rods, steel beams, and heat sinks. This is going to create a whopping 3 plutonium fuel rods per minute. And then we cut the amount of power in half. The first step gave me 150. This step gives me 75,000 megawatts. And I need exactly half the amount of water. And now I'm only getting 30 plutonium waste. I believe these are more radioactive, but these also stack to 500. So if you were going to stop at this point and just store the waste, you could easily build enough storage to just never run out. But I'm going to take that waste and we are going to bring it all the way over to here, and we are going to start our yellow row. We're going to make some Ficsonium. To make the Ficsonium, I need a particle accelerator. I'm going to combine the 30 plutonium waste with 30 Singularity Cells. In the last video, I made 50 Singularity Cells because that's how many I thought I needed. Like I said, I really screwed up my spreadsheet. And thankfully, I've got a pretty good use for those Singularity Cells as soon as I have all of this power created. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need power first. And then I'll also need 600 dark matter residue. My little IKEA lamps, Ficsonium, will then head into a quantum encoder. And these cool new machines are going to make my Ficsonium fuel rods. I'll just need 300 excited photonic matter, which is super easy to come by, some Fixite trigons, and of course more electromagnetic control rods. And this step is going to give me a byproduct of 300 dark matter residue per minute. So thankfully, this right here will output half of what this step needs. So it will still take some more SAM, but thankfully only half as much. That will produce 30 Ficsonium fuel rods. And when I burn those in the nuclear power plants with 3,600 water per minute, it will provide an extra 37,500 megawatts, and I will have zero waste. So if we use all default recipes, you'll probably notice a pattern. It basically just halves the amount of power you get in each step. The uranium fuel rods are going to give me 150, plutonium 75, and then our last step is 37.5 thousandths of megawatts. This should add 262,500 megawatts to my power grid. This isn't my first nuclear power plant. I typically use almost all the alternate recipes when it comes to the whole nuclear chain. That has the advantage of being able to produce much more power for the amount of uranium you put in. It does get a lot more expensive as far as other parts go. I think mainly aluminum and SAM. Because I've never done it before, I wanted to see how much simpler it would be if I only used the default recipes for the main chain. I'm still using alts for all the basic parts. I'm not that crazy. This power plant should provide enough power for the rest of my save. The other reason I wanted to show you everything laid out like this and highlight the ones in green are to show you all of the parts that I will not be building today. Today, I'm going to be focusing on pretty much all of the secondary parts. I'm going to build a factory to take care of all of the concrete, sulfuric acid, electromagnetic control rods, encased industrial beams, and everything else that I'm going to need so that in the next video, I can build all of this. Now let's jump back to the real save and let's get started on this new factory. Back in the real save. So as you can see, we've got our train station over here. And my first attempt at this factory was built right here. And the reason for it is there's a nice little water well. But unfortunately, now that I've reran the numbers, that actually won't provide enough water. I would still need to bring in more from somewhere else. And so this new factory is going to be right over here. Still nice and close to the train station. And in the next video, I'm going to come right over here to where this little crater is. And that is where I'll manufacture the actual fuel rods. But for today, we're just going to be using this location right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at a snapshot of just what I'm going to be doing today, not the entire picture. When planning out a factory like this, I often just kind of go through the list and I more or less put the recipes in order of how complex they are. With a factory like this, then I go through and rearrange them into which floors I actually want things to be going on. If you watch any of the earlier videos in this playlist, you'll notice that I pretty much always go smelters at the bottom, then constructors, then assemblers, and I just kind of go up in complexity floor by floor. But with this factory, I find it a lot easier to be able to group machines in relevant pieces because I'm just manufacturing a whole bunch of different things. So on the bottom floor, I'm going to take care of the sulfuric acid and the wet concrete, because those are the two steps that need water. And so if I can avoid having to use pumps, might as well. And so those will all go on the bottom floor, and that's why we're right here next to this lake. In total, I think I'm going to need something like 7 water extractors. The next floor up is going to take care of a lot of the basic iron, copper, and caterium. The third floor will then manufacture my electromagnetic control rods. And the final floor is going to take care of my trigons, encased industrial beams, heat sinks, and the missing dark matter residue I'm going to need. This factory right here will provide almost all of those missing parts to that diagram I showed. Once I've got this taken care of, I'll pretty much just be missing the uranium and the entire factory to build the fuel rods, but that'll be in the next video. One of the major things that I learned by already building this factory once is I am down to 94 power shards, and I've got no more in my dimensional depot. This factory is going to need more than 94. Instead of only being able to get through the first or second floor and then having to figure that out, I think it's best just to take care of this now. Now I'm just going to hop in my train and head back to my hub. Now that I'm here in the end game, it seems silly not to use all of the things I have available to me. If we pull up the codex here and we look at the power shard, these are the 3 ways that I've been working with on making these. Now obviously slooping it will give me double all of this, and that's what this whole room does. And if I take a look at the map, I've done a pretty decent job. I mean, granted, there's probably power shards scattered throughout the entire world still. I haven't been that thorough, but I would say I've probably gathered a good amount of most of the map, except for one last region, and that's the Spire Coast. I think it's probably the most dense biome for power slugs, so I've just been leaving it as a just in case. And I think it's probably finally time I go through and pick up at least a few of them in here. But before I do that, there was one last recipe that I don't quite have yet for the power shards. And that's in the MAM. So if we go to power slugs, I just need time crystals and quartz crystals. Add that to the to-do list. Let's finally learn how to get the synthetic power shards.
Research completed. Synthetic power shard recipe unlocked. Exchanging regular exercise and filtered fresh air with automation is just the kind of progress Fixit likes to see.
No more exploring. Make these in the factory. You got it. Now if I look back at the power shards, I've got the last recipe. So I'm going to need more time crystals, dark matter crystals, quartz crystal, and the good old excited photonic matter. Which means this is going to be made in the quantum encoder. That'll give me a power shard and some of the dark matter residue. Will this end up being the last temporary setup I have to do this save? We'll see. Thankfully, this is going to be real easy. I just need one quantum encoder, one converter. We can go ahead and just put that in straight mode right into there. And just a quick 3 containers. That will feed everything. Let's go ahead and get everything else set up real quick though. So let's go ahead and put a normal container and then the dimensional depot right afterwards. So that way, if I fill up the dimensional depot, it won't stop. Because while this is working, we go ahead and set the recipe. Let's go ahead and obviously we're going to overclock. And I mean, we've got to summer sloop it. That is going to use an insane amount of power. I'll make sure to look at that in a second. But this is only going to produce 25 a minute, which is way more than I could actually use per minute. But if I want to stock this up and hopefully last until I can really automate these, I kind of want to let this run for at least a little while. While this is running and building up a stockpile, I'm going to go explore the Spire Coast. And then that way, after 40 minutes or an hour, I'll just be set on power shards for quite a while. Now I just need to deal with the dark matter residue, which again is just going to go onto another haphazardly placed particle accelerator on the side of the building. This only has to deal with 300, so I can use a Mark 1 pipe. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and just use the dark matter crystallization. Because if you take a look, 300 will get turned into 30. And this right here is only going to be using 25 per minute. So I'm actually going to be net positive. Just going to have them go right back into the dimensional depot because I'm about to pull all of them out. And if you just type in crystal, everything you need pops up. So we'll go ahead and pull out basically all I can of everything. And then each one gets its own container. First, we need to take a look at some power. So let's grab my main power. And let's see, we're going anywhere from 93 to 101. And my production is 111. And just this thing is probably going to use more than 20,000. Now, I do have some batteries, but I also have another trick up my sleeve. The good old alien power augmenter. And as you can see, I've got 43 Summers loops. So I think dedicating 10 to just make sure I have enough power to get this and the future factory up and running is definitely worth it. Now if I connect this and I will take a look, I went from 111 to 121. And with almost 19,000 stored charge, I think we'll be fine. But let's take a look. It would help if I set the excited photonic matter. What do I need? Only 150, so we can actually underclock this one. But there it is, my first synthetic power shard. And now the Summers loop is kicked in, so now I'm going to get 2 per cycle. Let's get rid of that dark matter residue and get them turned into crystals. And it hasn't shut off yet, so yeah, there we go. It looks like it's gonna peak, it's gonna use a couple seconds of battery, and then they're instantly gonna recharge. As long as they can keep recharging completely, I really don't have anything to worry about. Now the quartz crystal is what's gonna run out the fastest, so I'm gonna stock up on this, leave it here. And now, I'm going to go out to the Spire Coast while that works away and builds up a whole bunch of power shards. But I think we can go ahead and skip ahead. The temporary setup is all cleaned up. Let's take a look at my haul. So definitely could have gotten more, but you know, a few power slugs, a few alien remains, and quite a few power shards. So my dimensional depot is completely full. And I've got an extra 450 and these slugs that I haven't turned in yet. So I should be good. Let's go ahead and take care of these slugs. I'm really hoping that this is enough to get me to the point where I can fully automate them. I really don't need to hold 400 on me, so let's go ahead and leave everything but one stack in here. And that way I can just pull them out of the dimensional depot whenever I need them. Even though I don't necessarily need the extra power right now, I think eventually it'll be nice to have this already plugged in to get the whole nuclear power plant started. So I'm just going to leave this until it's running. And it's not like I'm going to need all of those Summers loops yet, so I think this is probably a good idea just to leave it attached to the power grid. Now let's go ahead and go back down to the train station and head back out to the desert. Back in the Dune Desert. This is the platform we're working with, which is a pretty decent size. It is 18 by 24. And I just used some 6x6 foundation blueprints. I do like the Mark III blueprint designer. I wanted the factory to be really close to the lake just so I could keep the pipes really short. And the closer I keep it this direction, the closer it is to where everything's going to end up going over there. Which meant I was going to build it right on top of this miner. So I've got one impure limestone node, so I can get a total of 300 out of here. I'm definitely going to need more than that, but hey, it's a start. This is a pretty huge area. I'm going to have plenty of space, but let's go ahead and start filling it up. So the first ones I want to do, I need 6 refineries on this side. This is going to be doing my wet concrete. And let's go ahead and center them on this thing right here. That looks good to me. So let's place the first 3 there, and now we can put this in blueprint mode. We'll just slap the other 3 right next to it. These will all be doing wet concrete. I'm going to be making 936 across 6 machines, 156 for each one. Paint those brown. Alright, good enough for now. Thankfully, with these clocked at this amount, I only need 195 water for each one, which is a really nice number to work with. I know that sounds weird. That means the Each group of 3 of these is actually right under 600. So I don't have to worry about putting the full 600 in the pipe. I am going to have to change these all to Mark II, but it should make feeding the water just a little bit easier, or at least not as much to worry about. For the sulfuric acid, I'm going to go ahead and use my 4 refineries blueprint. And then we'll just go ahead and line these up the same on this side. Let's try to make sure I've got... I won't need to do too much load balancing, but I also think this is probably where belts are going to come in from the train station, so I do want to make sure that I have enough room. And then I've got some extra room to do some load balancing down here, because not all of this space is going to be taken up by refineries. These ones will be making sulfuric acid, 900 across 8 machines, 112.5. So this will take 900 sulfur, which is going to be coming from way back there. There's actually a node, actually somewhere back there, I think. And wherever it is, it's going to come into the train station, and it's going to get put on the same belt highway that everything else from the train is coming on. And that's how it's going to plug in. So that's why the sulfuric acid is facing this way. The limestone is going to be coming from here. And if I go up, we can see where the other ones are. There's one limestone right there. And then in that crater that I'm going to end up building right on top of, there's the other limestone node that I need. There's also 2 iron nodes and a copper node. Since that factory won't be dealing with any of the basic components, I'm going to use all of those nodes in this project so that they're not just kind of hidden away and wasted. Let me do the real basic belt and pipe work here, and then I'll add another floor. And we'll move on to iron, copper, and caterium. And we're back. We've got the next floor added, and I went ahead and added the pipes for the sulfuric acid. Since I'll be making 900, I think it's going to be easiest if I just do 2 pipes of 450. Now we're on to the second floor. I've got quite a few machines to try to squeeze in up here, but I know we can do it. So I'm going to use this 4 foundries blueprint. The first step I'm going to take care of is the iron. I'm going to give myself 3 foundations, which is probably more than I need, but just in case I need to get parts to go kind of around the edges, I'd like to give myself a little bit more space. Now, if I wanted to do all of them in a row, it would take up, I think, pretty much the entire floor. So instead, what I'm actually going to do is I need 12 of these, so 3 sets of these blueprints. I'm going to do them in 3 rows like this. And I think that should give me enough space. So originally I made these for the copper ingots, but I'm going to repurpose this blueprint. For the iron alloy, I need 1,944 ingots across 12 machines, 162 for each foundry. And the way these are all going to get balanced is I'm going to have one splitter right here. The bottom belt is going to be the bigger one, so 86.4. This bottom belt is going to have 345.6 on each one of these. And so this is how I'll load balance all 3. And so now there's really only one direction for the output to go. I mean, I could just use a short lift or something, but these are just going to get grouped together in a line going this way. 162 out of each machine. Each group of 4 is outputting 648. So we'll just do a Mark 5. And then from here, I'm going to grab my 3 constructor blueprint. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in blueprint mode because I do want these just right next to each other. But I'm going to spin this around so that this can feed right into here. And I'll do that for all 3 of these rows. So let's go ahead and set the recipe. All of these are going to be turned into the steel pipes using the iron pipe alternate. In total, I'm making 486 across the 9 machines. They'll each intake 216 and give me 54. Each set of 4 foundries feeds into one set of 3 constructors. And that right there takes care of all of the steel pipes I need. To group them all together, I'm just going to do pretty much the same thing I did right on that side. I am just going to place a merger here in the middle of all of them. And then we can group up all 3 of these. This right here will take 1,036.8 iron ore and 259.2 copper ore and turn it into 486 steel pipes. Not too bad. If this isn't the first, it's probably the second time of this save where I've used a decimal point for the incoming amounts. Normally, I just love my round numbers. The reason I want this route is if you look at how much the values are, I need 1036.8. That's essentially just one pure node. I'm not going to use all of the iron in the world, so if I'm only using a little over 1,000 instead of the full 1,200 out of the pure node or 2 normal nodes, that is totally okay. So I am going to use just one set of nodes just for this recipe, because I also need the iron ore for the copper alloy ingot, but that is just going to come from a completely different node. So I am going to just completely avoid dealing with load balancing with these decimal points. This video is going to have plenty of load balancing without trying to get too crazy with it. Alright, so that took up a pretty good amount of space. So let's go ahead and come to this side and work with the copper. Thankfully for the copper, I only need 4 foundries. And I think I'm just going to give myself 2 foundations on both of the sides. I need 783 across the 4 machines. So hey, only 2 power shards for each one. These copper ingots are going to get used for 2 different things. I need them for copper sheets and the fused quick wire. And for that, I'm going to need 9 constructors. I actually think I'm going to bring these back by a whole foundation. There's still more I need to fit up here. There we go. Hopefully that'll be enough space. These first 3 are going to be doing the copper sheet, and because I don't need that many, I'm just going to use the default. Even though the steam copper is much more efficient, I only need a total of 54. So the default one works just fine. The next 6 constructors actually don't have anything to do with the copper. As you probably heard me say, the rest of it is going to go to fuse quick wire, which is not in a constructor. I'm going to need a total of 9 assemblers, so 3 sets of this blueprint. And we may need to space things out just a little bit different. I think I would like a little bit more of a gap right here because I'm probably going to need stuff to come through here. But more or less, this is the layout. Just probably need to bring these in a little bit so I have a little bit more room up here. Like I said, these 9 are going to be doing the fuse quick wire. I'll be making 1,620, so 180 for each one, and nice, easy, convenient numbers to work with. These obviously need to be Caterium colored, and all these need to be copper. Okay, so these last 6, what did I place these for? These, I need the MAM for. Take a look at the hard drive library. The fuse wire is a great recipe, but that's also made in the assembler. You probably know I'm not using that one. All the way down here, I've got the Caterium wire. I don't know if I've ever actually used this because I've always felt like I needed to use Caterium for other things. I could make wire. I could make wire out of iron if I wanted to. But 1 Caterium ingot into 8 wire, and so it ends up being 15 to 120 per minute, is just so nice. You just need so few machines. So with that alternate recipe selected, got the Caterium wire. I need 1296 across the 6 machines, 216 for each one. That'll input 162 Caterium ingots and output just shy of 1300 wire. Not too bad. The downside is that does mean I need to keep it on 2 belts because not all of it fits on one. But that's an easy problem to deal with. Yeah, I definitely think I'm just going to move these rows just back a little bit. I don't need quite as much space as I gave them because I do want to put one last thing over here. And that is going to be just a real simple setup. I just need 2 smelters. They're probably going to be somewhere around here. And then that'll lead into 2 constructors. So we can keep the belting nice and simple there. Just need 1 splitter in the beginning and then 1 merger at the end. These are going to be making iron plates. I don't need a lot of iron plates, just enough to make the nitric acid. And each one of these is going to be clocked to 150%. I need 60 plates in total. And that means that these are both clocked to 150%. I definitely need to go through and rearrange all of that. But before I do that, let's go through the load balancing for the copper. Well, the strangest thing happened. I actually haven't had this happen to me before yet. As I was going through the load balancing, the screen just froze on a single frame. All of the audio recorded fine, but only having the audio doesn't do me a whole lot of good. And unfortunately, I didn't notice until editing. So the easiest thing to do was just to load the closest save that had it done, and let me just walk you through what I did here. The 783 copper ingots are getting split 675 and 108. Those numbers don't sound great, but I can actually divide all of them by 27. So now the ratio gets reduced down to 29 into 25 and 4, which is a little bit easier for my little brain to work with. Between these two belts, that is going to be my initial 29, and then that goes into the merger, and then we're just going to follow the diagram. So once we have the part that loops back, the 29 will then become 32, and we can make sure. So 32 times 27, that belt is going to have 864. So that one needs to be a Mark 6. And now that we're working with 32, since that's a power of 2, I can just split it in half over and over again. So it's 16 and 16. There's 8 and 8. This 4 right here, 4 times 27, there's the 108 that I need for the copper sheets. With this 108, split it in half. There's 2, 1 and 1. So this is the 3 that needed to get looped back to the initial merger. And this right here has my 675. Sorry if this seemed out of place, but now it's back to where the video is supposed to be. And now things are spaced out just a little bit better. I've got all the basic belt work out of the way. I also added the load balancing for the Ficsonium, but I actually did it wrong. So let me just delete this real quick and let's go through the correct way to do it. Basically, I did the load balancing right. I just sent the wrong amounts to the wrong places, and it would be easier if I just flip-flop the directions of everything. I'm bringing in 297 Ficsonium ingots. I need to split that 162 and 135. All of those numbers sound horrible, but we can actually reduce it down to 11 getting split into 6 and 5, which is actually pretty easy to do. We're going to split it 12 ways and just loop back 1. So we'll start with a merger. And because I have the space, I'm just going to give these 2 meters. And I only need 3. And then I just need one last merger right here. The Ficsonium will plug into here, so that'll be 297. So that's going to require a Mark 4. And this is also going to require a Mark 4 because we're going to end up looping back 27. So this belt will have 324. We're going to split that in half. So here's 162. And that means here is 162, which is the exact amount I need for the Ficsonium wire. And so for that, I'm just going to use a lift. With the remaining 162, we're going to split that in half again. I've got 81, and this 81 is going to plug to the outside of that merger. With this 81, we're going to split it 3 ways, so that'll be 27, 27, and here is the 27 I needed to loop back. Out of this merger will be the 135 Ficsonium ingots that I need for the fuse quick wire. So I'm just going to redo that belt, and that'll go there. And then this one will get to plug into this one right here. So I'll redo that belt. And that takes care of the steel pipes, the wire, and quick wire. Now we're on to floor 3, where I'm going to make the stators, AI limiters, and then bring those together to make the electromagnetic control rods. The step that requires the most amount of machines is the stators. I'm just going to be using the default recipe, so I'm going to use all 486 steel pipes and 1,296 wire, and that'll create the 162 stators I need. Thankfully, with power shards, I only need 16 assemblers. I really should combine these into one blueprint so I have a 4 assembler blueprint, but for now I'm just going to alternate my 2. So I have a right and a left version, and I'm just going to pair these up over and over again. And just enough space. So I've got 2 foundations on either side, and 3 foundations here in the front, which will be plenty to do all of the load balancing. 16 machines is nice and easy. I just group up these pairs, and then this half, and then one last splitter in the very middle for the steel pipes. But the wire will be left into 2 halves because I can't fit it all onto one belt. But that's going to be pretty straightforward, so let's just go ahead and set the recipe. 162 across 16 machines. 202.5%. I could have used slightly less machines. I need 32.4 at 100%. So if we divide that by 2.5, at a minimum I need 13. 13 isn't a number I want to load balance. 14 and 15 aren't really numbers I wanted to work with either. So 16 machines is just a much easier number to work with. It does waste a couple of power shards, but that's okay. I just made a whole bunch. That's one half of the parts I need for the electromagnetic control rods. The other half is the AI limiters. And for this step, I only need 6 assemblers. I'm going to use my 3 assembler blueprint. And then I also have an offset one, just because I like the symmetry. For this one, I'm actually not going to be using the default recipe. Let's dig into the hard drive library, and there it is, plastic AI limiters. Instead of copper sheets in QuickWire, I get to use plastic in QuickWire. And it makes it at just a slightly higher rate. Now I can scroll down here and select the plastic AI limiter, load it up with power shards, 108 across 6 machines, 18 for each one. This is where all 1,620 QuickWire are going. Thankfully that fits on 2 belts, so one belt will feed this 3, the other belt will feed these 3, and then I just need one splitter here in the middle to split the plastic. Except for these need 63 plastic for each one, so just barely needs the Mark III, so I need to make sure that I upgrade all of these. And these to Mark III. And there we go. One last row of assemblers. I need 12 for the electromagnetic control rods. Because 12 is divisible by 3, it would be much easier to just use that blueprint. But since I'm going to have these across from those, just like the symmetry, I'm going to use my 2 assembler blueprints to get all 12 down. And let's go ahead and set these recipes. And just using the default recipe for this one, 108 across 12 machines, each one will output 9. Except for I just realized I actually want to spin these around 180. I want the inputs to be facing the middle. And the output is going to be facing the outside. I'm going to line these up like that. And I'm going to redo this row. Gotta love blueprints. Quick and easy adjustment. Same thing with the first row. Doing the load balancing for this is going to be pretty easy. I just need a stack of 2 splitters right in the middle of each pair. And then just one last one in the very center to split it between those 3 splitters. I just need to merge up all of these and plug them into one. Merge up all of these and plug it into the other one. Give me just a second and let me do this basic belt work. And here we go. We've got the really basic load balancing going on. And because I had the space, I figured, might as well just do the same thing. Instead of just doing aligned mergers, this just looks way more fun. Sometimes it's nice to let them take up a little bit more space. All of this was pretty straightforward. This takes care of all 108 electromagnetic control rods I need. And now we can move on to the final floor. This floor is taking care of all of the other recipes, because none of these actually use a whole lot of machines, so I was able to fit the dark matter residue, heat sinks, encased industrial beams, and the trigons all up here. Let's start with the trigons, and for that, it starts with a converter. So again, I want to give myself, I think, 2 foundations on the side, just in case, and we'll just give myself plenty of space, because honestly, this floor can be pretty spaced out. So I know I need 4, but what I'm actually going to do is just place 1 for right now, and then I'm going to grab my blueprint, the good old 2 constructor blueprint. And with this one, we're going to stick it right here. So let's go ahead and set these recipes. With the Fixit trigons, I am going to completely overclock these. They'll intake 25 ingots, and I'll get 75 trigons. For the converter and the ingots, I'm definitely using the aluminum recipe because it is the most efficient as far as SAM is concerned. Default, it outputs 30. Fully overclocked, I could get 75, but I really like the idea of pairing up 1 converter with the 2 constructors, and so I'm going to clock this to 50. And by doing that, I get really nice numbers to work with. 100 SAM, 200 aluminum. But now the output is here to here, so I could do that. Curve mode, default. I don't really like any of those. So instead, I'm going to copy it and put it there for a second, just so I can copy it again, and it'll save the recipe. And now I'm going to hold Control, and I'm just going to have this line up. So I'll still have my 2 foundation gap, and then now I can just have a straight belt go from here to here. And I can delete this, and now I just need 3 more, and 3 more sets of constructors. Preferably not stacked on top of each other. And that is all I need for all 600 trigons. Since I've got 4 machines, the load balancing is going to be really easy. Just sets of splitters here and there, and some lifts and belts. Well, it looks like I'm going to have a ton of space, so I may rearrange things, but for now, this will work. The next one I want to work on needs 3 constructors. These are going to be using the aluminum beam recipe, where you can turn an equal number of aluminum ingots into steel beams. I need 162 steel beams, and I only need 3 constructors to do it. Beautiful. Some, but not all, of the steel beams are going to go into a set of 3 assemblers. These are going to be doing the encased industrial beams. Each one is going to be clocked to 200%. Each one needs 36. For all 3, I need 108 steel beams. Each one of these outputs 54, so hey, look at that. All I need to do is just delete that one belt. And there we go. There's all the steel beams. And then for the concrete, I just need to do a little bit of load balancing down below to bring that up. 2 last recipes. For no particular reason, but just to use up some more space. For this one, I'm just going to put way over here. And this lone assembler is going to make all of the heat sinks I need. Just using the default recipe, so I'll be bringing in aluminum sheets by train, and then the copper sheets are coming from down below. I need 18 in total. Only 1 machine, gotta love it. And the last step is going to be doing the dark matter residue. So for this, I'm just going to do them opposite of the other converters. Let's go ahead and place 2 of them. Each one is overclocked to 150. That will make my 300 in total that I need. And so now, on this floor is where kind of everything will get grouped together. I guess I'll probably move this one over, actually. That way I can group all the encased industrial beams. They'll go into here. The E-sinks will also plug into here. The extra 54 steel beams is actually the amount that I need for the next factory, because steel beams are used to make the plutonium fuel rods. And then I'll be able to place one last merger over here. So that will group together all of the trigons. All 600 trigons will get sent into here. And then this can go downstairs and it'll collect the other random things that I've made. Pretty sure I can fit all of the finished products on one belt. All of the concrete that I need to send to the final factory will have to go on its own. I think this one just needs to be a Mark II. And yeah, you get the picture. I'll probably space things out just a little bit more just because I can. Or this floor will become a little bit smaller. But let me take care of that, and let me take care of just the kind of in-factory belt work. Because like I said, this needs copper sheets, and the copper sheets are coming from right over there. So I think I'll probably use this area over here for most of the elevators, but I'm not going to make myself just stick to only using that area. Some of the things are just going to be easier to run on other sides of the factory. And I'll just have a walkway that goes all the way around, I think. Let me get to work, and I'll show you what it looks like. I decided I just had way too much space, so I just deleted some foundations. I think having the top floor be a little bit smaller is totally fine. And it'll be easy enough to work around. Before I start adding all the extra belts and lifts to get things to go from point A to point B, let's do one last bit of load balancing. The good old concrete. Gonna go ahead and just group all of this in a line. Out of here, I'm gonna have 936. The next factory needs 720, and this factory needs 216. 720 is actually a pretty easy number to get if I just wanted to use the smart splitter trick. But these numbers can actually be reduced by quite a bit, and it becomes a pretty easy ratio to work with. I need to split 13 into 10 and 3. So I'm going to go ahead and add one more merger here. And then we'll go splitter, merger, splitter, splitter. On the right side, I just need one merger facing this way. And on the left, I just need one merger facing that way. And now to make sure that I get the right belt, I just need to multiply all of these numbers by 72. So 15 times 72 gives me 1080. So that means the 936 will get turned into 1080 right here. And 1080 is 360 times 3. So I just need a bunch of Mark IV lifts and belts. So there's 360, there's 360. Out of here is 720. And then with this 360, do the rest of it. So there is what I need for the next factory. This 360 is then going to turn into 432 once we loop that back. This is a 5-way split here. So here's 216, and this right here is the 216 that I need to go upstairs. And now to complete the 5-way split, I got to use all 3 outputs. Each one has 72, so one of them goes back to this first merger, and then the other 2 are going to get grouped together. And then we'll just make a short little lift here, and we'll add another one over here. And this gets looped back to the very first merger. Yes, using the smart splitter would be more compact and just easier to do in general. But for whatever reason, I just kind of use those as a last resort. I really prefer doing the ratio splits. I think it's more fun, and I think they look cooler. Now I need to figure out how to get this concrete up to that very top floor, and everything else to basically where it's going to go. But for the most part, that's just getting things from point A to point B, and trying to make it look not too bad. So let me get to work, and I'll show you what it looks like. And here we are. Because I had the extra space, I went ahead and added the walkway foundation around the edges to all of the floors. And on most of them, I went ahead and added the beams. They really help run the power along the floor and keep it pretty out of the way, but easily accessible. I do really like hiding the wires either completely in the foundation or just clip it through the foundation and place the wall mounts on the ceiling of the floor below. But if you ever have to move things around or you just need to mess with the power for some reason, this is just so much more convenient, I found. Like I said, for the most part, it's just getting things from point A to point B. And so this right here is where a whole lot of the items are going to come up. And then I had to do just a little bit more load balancing for 2 of the items. So the first one, this farther one, is for the reanimated Sam. I need 400 to go one way and 150 to go the other. So this was just another 11-way split. So we start with the merger, that goes into a splitter, that gets split in half, then that gets split in half, and then the very last one gets split into thirds. We make sure to loop 1/12 back, which would have 50 on here, turning that initial 550 into 600. Thankfully, that was a really easy ratio split to do. This one just was not going to be convenient, and so I decided to just take the easy way out. For the aluminum ingots, I need exactly 800 to get turned into trigons. And then I need 162 to get turned into aluminum beams. The best I'd be able to do is divide all those numbers by 2. So I went with the smart splitter. Let me show you. 962 will plug into here, and then I have any going to left. Overflow will go to the center. Because the initial belt won't be a completely full 1200 belt, I'm going to use this split belt speed trick to make sure that this stays completely full. So I've got a Mark III leading into a Mark I. That will ensure that this is always completely full. With that Mark I, we're going to split it all 3 ways. So we've got 20, 20, and here's 20. So I siphon off 20 and send that into a merger. The other 40 gets merged up with the overflow from here. So going into here, I have that 962 minus the 20. And then this is again another smart splitter. So with this, I have any to the left, overflow forward. So this merger right here only has one input. And the reason is I really dislike the look of doing this split belt trick with the Mark 6 belts, because they look so different from all of the other belts. If I do that and then a Mark 5, which is what I want to do, that just looks so weird to me and I don't like it. So what I've done is I just have the Mark 6 go into a merger, and then out of the merger, I have the Mark 5. It still looks a little bit weird, but it looks way less weird to me. So even though we've got a Mark 6 here, it is going to get limited down to the Mark 5. So out of this 942, I'm going to have 780. That'll get merged together with this 20. So I've got my 800, leaving me 162 on this belt. Next thing I want to work on is getting everything belted over here that's nearby. So for two of the nodes, like this one right here, I just have this kind of attached. And then we've got the one limestone that's inside. I want to create the belt highway from that crater because I'm going to use all four of those nodes and bring those over here. And then I'm still going to need a couple of the other nodes that are out here. Here is what I hope is enough space for the final factory. The big square on the outside is I think 30 by 30 foundations. But for right now, I really just needed the ore. So I've got that grouped together, and it's going to go on its own little belt highway. Comes along here, and then the limestone will then meet up with this other node. Each one of those belts will have 600. Combined together, that'll get turned into 1200. Those three belts continue on over here and into the factory. The other path here is going to be for the final product, but haven't gotten that far yet. And then I just needed another 3 nodes. Those get grouped together and head into the factory there. And there's just a little bit of space under here. Even though I wish it was cleaner, there's no clipping. Things get to where they need to go. Just barely. I did test it though. The items on the belt actually won't clip into the belts right above it. Thank you for the ore being short. I needed one more copper node, so that one comes over to here, comes through the wall, merges with this node, and then goes into the factory. These 4 belts are what I need from the train station. For this, I just created a real basic blueprint. It's just using some of the big frame pillars on the bottom so that when it does need more than one stack, like down here, it's just really easy to zoom down. And then it's got just enough space for the 4 belts. So if we follow this all the way back to the train station, I've added some signs to show you what each one is. So I'll be using 2 sushi belts. I can fit all of the Caterium and the plastic on one belt. Sulfur will have its own. The aluminum products will be on one belt. And then the reanimated SAM will just get its own. And besides the sulfur, pretty much everything else is coming by train. It's time we fill this up with some load balancing. Well, for starters, let's take a look at the one train we already have running out here. Currently, there is one train that uses this, and it makes 3 different stops. All the way out to the west coast to get plastic, in the middle of the map to get the 1 pasta, and then out to the swamp to get those 20 pressure conversion cubes. Since all of this is using just 1 freight car, I could easily add some more and use this train as kind of a dual purpose thing. Now out of those 3 stops, the swamp is the one where I have the least amount of room to easily add more train stations. So even though I probably need more stuff from all 3 of those stops, these freight cars are going to be dedicated just to the swamp. So I'm going to add 3 more freight cars to that train. And because I don't think all of the aluminum is available in that one location, I'm going to go ahead and jump in my train. And I'm going to head out to the swamp and I'm going to take a look to see what I can put on there. Normally, I would do the unload balancers first, so that I can just get the train up and running as soon as I have everything set up on the other side. But with this one, I have a feeling I'm going to need to set up a couple different trains because some of the aluminum is going to be in the swamp. The other aluminum is in the Eastern Dune Forest, or that new one that I completely forgot about that's actually completely irrelevant, that's out in the Red Jungle. Turns out, I didn't actually need that much aluminum now that I reran the numbers. I will eventually use it though. Back in the swamp. Well, let's head down into the depths of the train station and see how much I have to work with. All the numbers are still looking good. And if I take a look at what I'm sinking, this one right here is the only one with aluminum on it. And if we trace this back, this is all I have free at the swamp. 580. Thankfully, 580 is a pretty round number. I'll take it. That's a good chunk out of the 960-ish I need. So I am going to take this and load it into the train. So you may be thinking, putting 580 in here, and it turns out I'll be able to get 525 SAM out of the area. Putting that much in each freight car is a horrible idea, because if we do the math, both the aluminum ingots and the reanimated SAM can only stack to 100. So that means each freight car could only hold 3,200 of each of these. So let's work with the bigger one, the 580. If I only had one train, which is what I currently have, it would need to complete its round trip in under 5.5 minutes. And the one train that I do have running has 4 different stops to make, which takes about 2 minutes out of that time. It's definitely not going to happen. So what I'm going to do is just add a second train. So the first train will still make its really long round trip out to the west coast, the middle of the map, the swamp, and back up to the desert. But this new train is just going to run straight from the desert and down to the swamp. Having 2 trains and one of them having a much shorter round trip time should give me the throughput I need. But like with most of my factories, that's why I'm taking care of this now. That way I can let this run for a while I take care of all my decorations later. And I can make sure that I'm actually getting the throughput I need. We'll get to the SAM part in a second, but for right now I want to go back to the desert and set up the unload balancers so that I can go ahead and get this train. Now I'm back in the desert and I know which freight platform is getting what amounts of what material. So now I can do my load balancers below. Just add my floor holes here so I know where they go. So since I've got tons of space, I'm going to bring these all the way down to the ground. But if for the next train station I need more space, for that one I'll just raise up above. Alright, so I just place a temporary lift so I know where to put my industrial storage container. And then I'm just going to delete it. I just want things to unload as fast as they can, so we're going to use a Mark 6 into there. And now I need to load balance 580, which is pretty easy. We're just going to go ahead and place a splitter here. We'll have to use a Mark 5 belt, so that's 780. If I place a merger back here, what I can do is grab a Mark 2. So there's 120. Now on the other side, if I do the same thing, and I'm going to take a 120 belt. Because if you divide 780 by 3, it's going to try to divide it evenly 260 on each belt. But these will both be limited to 120. And now I just need one merger here. I take the 120, split it 3 ways. 40 and 40 is my 80. Combine this 80 with the 120. And there's the 200 I needed to loop back. So I added the 780. I'm left with my 580. Now the load balancer for the SAM is going to be a little bit more involved. For this one, I needed my diagram. To get 525, we need to work with a 780 belt, and then I'm going to need to loop back 255. So here we're going to start with a merger, and then it's going to go 4 splitters in a row. On the left side, I just need 3 mergers. On the right side, we're going to do a little bit more balancing. So it's going to go 1 splitter here, and that's going to get split in half. And this splitter is going to take that half and split it all 3 ways. So to finish this, I just need 2 more mergers, 1 here and 1 here. All right, let's go through it. So 780 into here. I'm going to end up looping back 30. So this is going to become 810. So this section needs the Mark 6 belt. 810 divided by 3 is 270. We're just going to split this in thirds, and we're actually going to do the same thing with the next one. So let's go ahead and just split those up. 270 divided by 3 will be 90 on each one. And we're going to do the same thing. These are going to be 30. Now I can delete all of the extras and place my belts. Mark 2 into there, Mark 2 into there. This right here is going to be 450. This is 30, this is 30, and here is 510. And then this 30 is just getting split in half. So here's 15, and here is my 525. Now let's deal with the rest of this. So we come back here to this 270 that got split off. Again, we're gonna split this into thirds. Here's 90, here's 90, and there's 90, 30, 30, and 30. So right here is 210 plus the 30, and then the very last 15 from this splitter is going to come all the way over and into here, and this right here gives me the 255 I needed to loop back. I wish it was a little bit smaller, but hey, it could have been worse. Now I have the unload side, I can get everything plugged up on the loading side. For the aluminum, that's pretty much just sending it into a buffer and then onto the train. I don't have to do anything there. So I'm going to get that set up, and then we can start working on the SAM. So let me go ahead and skip ahead to that point. The aluminum is running, so now let's just go ahead and start working on the SAM. We take a look at the map and turn on the resources. We can see there's a couple of nodes of SAM nearby. The closest one is this one right here. So that'll give me 600 SAM. And then we've got an impure and a pure. So that's 12, 18, 2100. 2100, it'll end up dividing by 4. And that's how I came up with the 525 reanimated SAM that I'll be putting on the train. Thankfully for this first one, I've got a little bit of infrastructure already in place. So if we head right into here, there's the node. And now I'll be able to just use this to get it back. To do that, it's pretty easy. I could replace this with something else, but what I'm going to do is just place a foundation, grab the stackable conveyor pole, nudge it into place. Now, the thing about just placing it like this, if I delete the foundation, I mean, it's fine, but I don't know. It just looks a little bit funny. Just kind of hanging off there. So it's easier with the foundation in place. What I'm going to do is just grab some beam connectors, and if I just place this here and here, I think that looks a lot better. As far as this goes, it's going to be a real simple setup. I think I can have this facing this way and not have... Alright, doesn't look like anything's going to clip into it. Since I can get 600 out of that, I only need 2 constructors. Just needs 1 splitter. Grab the reanimated SAM. Completely overclocked. These can intake 300 and output 75. Well, I guess I can't blow that thing up, so let's just move this slightly forward. Much better. Now all I need is a merger up here. So now on here, I've got 150. Now I just need to figure out a way that I like to get it on there, and then add stackable conveyor poles all the way back. Should be easy enough. Give me a second and I'll show you what it looks like. I decided to go with the curve mode. So now that joins just right on top of the bus. And then right into the train station. Let's go work on the second node. The next node I'm going to work on is the pure node. So this is right on top of the waterfall, so we're just outside the swamp. So it is going to have to go on a little bit of a journey here. And again, it's just so much easier to transport the reanimated SAM than the SAM. The pure node has twice as much, so now I need twice as many constructors. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my 2 constructor blueprint. I've got all 4. Just 1 splitter in the middle. And then 1 more merger here at the end. So we're going to completely overclock this to 1200. Got to make sure we change all the belts, and then we're going to do the same thing, completely overclock these. Because I've had some weird issues with splitting a completely full 1200 belt in the past, and someone commented that sometimes it's easiest just to keep the same speed right after you split it. I'm just going to do that because I would like for this to just never have any issues. So the 1200 will get split 600 and 600. And then from there, we'll go 300, 300 into each of these. Each of these will output 75. And so now I've got 300 out of here. And for that, what I'm going to do is it's going to go on a little bit of a journey. And we are going to have to change some elevation. We're going to go around here. And then, yeah, probably go over 1. And then good old 2-meter ramps are going to take us all the way down here. Excuse me, sir. I don't know what happened. He just got spooked and ran away. Anyways, we can keep building this factory. We'll ramp down to here, because now we're at the impure node. Oh, wow. Got to get rid of all these guys first. Now that those guys are out of the way, I'm going to do the same thing here. And I think you can see where this is going. This is an impure node, so I'm only going to need 1 constructor. 1 miner, 1 constructor, and then we'll have a merger. I'll bring that belt down here. It'll combine with this one, so that'll have the 375. And then from here, I'm going to do kind of the same thing, and we're going to ramp down this direction. And then I'm just going to build right on top of this one right here. I'll use the same trick I used over there, although some of these are so high I need to nudge this down, but that's okay. Now that we have vertical nudging, we can overcome these obstacles pretty easily. We'll just add the foundation and then the support, and then I'll add the beam connectors to make it look a little bit better. And then at least from here, I can use a bit of the infrastructure instead of adding more and more. And I'll just have the reanimated SAM just run right on top of the bauxite, all the way to the train station. Even though I really didn't decorate it at all, I did decide to give the miner its little housing, so it didn't look so plain. I should really use patterns more. That just comes along this way like I showed. Use the good old curve mode, and then ramp it down here. Meets up with the impure node. Drops down, and then from here, just runs right on top of the bauxite. So it does go on a bit of a journey, but then once it's inside the train station, it merges up with the other node. They go into a small container and onto the train. And now both trains are running, and it looks like I'm getting the throughput that I'm looking for. At least the load balancers are working. That takes care of the aluminum ingots and the reanimated SAM that I'm getting out of the swamp. But this train has one more freight car, and that's the second one, which is going to take care of the plastic. I need 378. So let me go through setting up the unload balancer for this down below. I've got the lift feeding into an industrial storage container. And here's the diagram. Since I need 378, I need to work with 480, which means I'm going to loop back 102 into the storage container. So let's just follow the diagram. I like to just start with the main line here, which is 5 splitters. And then finishes off with the good old 5-way split, so a merger and 2 more splitters. The left side is collecting most of it to get my 378. I'm going to work my way backwards. I need 2 mergers. Skip that one. Another merger. Skip that one. Another merger. And then one last one at the very front. On the right side is what's going to collect the 102 to loop back. So I need a merger here. I'm going to give it just a little bit more space because I know there's going to be part that loops back. And then one last merger here. We start with 480. If I divide that in 3, I've got 160 on each one of these outputs. And here we have 320. With this 160, we'll split it in half. So there's 80 and 80. And we're just going to split it in half a whole bunch of times, basically. And here we come to the 5-way split. 10 gets input into the merger. But we're going to loop this part back, which is going to be 2. So this is 12. So there's 6, and there's 6. Each one of these has 2. And this part is going to come into this merger. Here's 22 plus the 80. Here is my 102 back into the storage container. We've got 320 plus 40. Here's my 360, 370, 376, and now 378, which is just going to go into another sink. With this side done, now I can head out to the west coast and get it loaded onto the train. Back at the west coast, where it's still cranking out a bunch of plastic and rubber, I added the second freight platform. 378 is going to go to the nuke power. Now the fun part about this is I have just enough. I got pretty lucky and I have a spare 14 plastic left over after this factory. And that's how much I need to split out of here and continue to sink. So the rest of this plastic is going to go all the way to the back, where it's going to plug into this storage container. But this belt right here is actually part of what's going all the way up to the front and getting sunk. And it is only 65. So thankfully I gave myself a little bit of a note, and if I split off 14/15, I can take this belt right here. This is 50 because I split this 100 belt in half. That 50 is going to a different factory. This 50 is just going to go on a belt. And we're just going to put a merger right in front of the storage container. So I can split off that 50, which would leave me 15. So now I can split off 14 out of that 15, and that will be the part that continues to get sunk. And then I'll just bring that other line of plastic all the way out here. And because I have the space, I can just build it kind of off here to the side. So we'll start with the splitter so we can split that into thirds. So there will be 5 on each one of those. And then we just do the 5-way split. So a merger and 2 splitters. So we'll have 5, 5, and 5. We'll work with this 5 right here. This 5 will then become 6 because we're going to loop this part back. And now I just need a couple mergers. So we'll line this up with the existing belt. So here's 5. And for the other 5, we'll just do a little short lift up and over. So now we've got 10 into here. 3 is going to come out of here. There's 13, and there's my 14. And here is the 1 per minute I needed to split off. Make sure that belt's in there, and now I can just start rearranging these. Plug that one in there. That was pretty painless. Now I just need to bring that other 300 something from the front of the factory and bring it up over here. Then I'm going to head back to the Dune Desert and get started on the next train. This train is fully operational now, and the throughput for the plastic is looking good. Plus or minus 1, which is good enough for me for right now. Now we get to move on to the next train. This one is going to take care of a couple things. I took all of the remaining available aluminum ingots from the swamp, which was 580, so I still need 382. I also need 90 aluminum sheets and 297 caterium ingots per minute, and 300 silica. Thankfully, all of these things can come from the Eastern Dune Forest aluminum train station. But as we can see, the floor holes are right here, and if I were to drop those straight down, and we're running into a little bit of a space issue. Some of these amounts were a little bit random, and they took a little bit of space. But that's why I gave myself so much verticality down here. I think I'd rather give myself more space down below, so we're going to work from the ceiling, and I think if I just give myself 3 foundations worth of space, that will be more than enough. And let's go with some glass foundations. The other thing I'm going to do is move these sinks over to here so that those are out of the way. Let me go ahead and knock out some of this and I'll skip ahead. These parts are rerouted to the new sinks, And I got a little carried away and already took care of the load balancing. But let me go through it. This first one is doing the 382 for the aluminum. And just like all the rest of these, I made a diagram ahead of time and then I just follow it. I'll upload this diagram along with all the rest of them to my Google Drive. If I ever forget one, just remind me in the comments. But I try to make sure that I add all of the ones that I use. So if this looks familiar, it's because it's almost identical to the 378 we just did with the plastic, which was another reason I felt like just skipping this. It's basically the exact same thing, except for at the very end, it's slightly different, so you end up with 382 instead of the 378 I did down below. But it's basically just you take the 480, you split it into thirds, so you've got 160, 160. You start off with 320 on this side, and then you're just working with the 160, which is real nice and easy to split in half over and over again, and then you eventually just do a 5-way split. And that takes care of all the rest of the aluminum ingots I was missing. The next freight car is doing aluminum sheets and the deuterium ingots. And to handle that, the lift goes right into a smart splitter. I've got deuterium going to the left, the aluminum sheets to the right. So the aluminum sheets come over to here, and to get 90, it's a super easy load balancer. You just need a 120 belt, you split that in half, and then split one of those in half. There, I've got my 90, here is 30 to loop back to the storage. For the deuterium, I needed to get 297. So instead of splitting it into thirds, we do still start with a 480 belt, but then we split it in half, over and over and over, until we finally get to the end part where it's a 5-way split. But this should look pretty similar. And then the last train is bringing in silica. Now, silica isn't needed for today's factory at all, but I do need it for the overall project. And since it's going to be coming from that station, I might as well just take care of it now. Plus, the load balancing, as you can see, is just so easy. I just have a smart splitter set to have any left and right. The overflow is to the center. That way it'll make sure to prioritize the Mark 1 and the Mark 2 belt, which total to 180, leaving me with 300 on this line. Now we can get this train loaded up, so I'll see you back at the Eastern Dune Forest. When I first started building out here, I knew that I was going to build a couple other things, but I really never anticipated it getting quite as busy as it did. So I've got those three, that factory, the 1500 copper, and my first aluminum. And some extra trigons tucked away there in the corner. Which I think makes this the busiest train station in my world, which is kind of unfortunate because it probably does not have the best intersection right out front of it. But I think everything is spaced out enough. I really haven't seen any traffic issues. But it is something I'm going to need to keep an eye on, because now I've added another train station to the top. For this one, if we just delete some foundations and go straight down, this is definitely one of my busier train stations. Kind of starting to run out of space. But I'm sure I can find enough space to make this all fit. But since it is, well, Bean loves it so much that he can poke his head through the foundation to tell me. Hey, buddy. Since it is pretty crowded in here, I'm going to go ahead and just skip ahead and show you what it ends up looking like. There definitely wasn't enough space, so I just made some more. Good old glass foundations gave me just enough room to place the storage containers to load it up onto the train. That first freight car is dealing with the aluminum ingots, so let's go ahead and trace this back. The 382 are just coming from over here, and now I am left with a whopping 211 aluminum ingots. That is plenty of wiggle room. I really didn't need to build that extra 3,000 out in the red jungle, but trust me, those won't go wasted. I just didn't need to do it before the power plant. So our line is coming from two spots. This first one is what I already had left over. I think this was 300 something. I wish I left a sign here. I left a good amount of signs, but not as many as I would have liked. If there's ever a factory where you know you're going to come back to, just leave yourself lots of signs. You're never going to regret it. The missing 55 I needed from that amount is coming from this right here. This load balancing starts up here, and it's coming after all of this load balancing. These ingots go on quite a journey. But I do remember that this belt right here has 256, which, since it's a power of 2, is just super easy to work with. So that just snakes around here. And then we just split in half, over and over and over. And over. Until I have 201 on this side, and 55 on this side. That groups up with the 327 that I had coming from this other load balancer in the past. And that's how I get the 382. And I'm left with 211 because I've got that 201. And I had one other source of aluminum left, which was right over here. Coming out of this belt right here is 100 aluminum ingots. That 100 then comes over to just a very simple load balancer where I split it in half. So we've got 50 and 50, and then that 50 goes into a 5-way split so that I could split off 10, and that continues to go to the sink. The 90 all gets grouped together and goes on a little journey over here to 2 more assemblers. I knew I was going to do some manufacturing under here. I did not anticipate having as many machines as I ended up just creating random amounts of either aluminum sheets or casings. I mean, that was my entire plan. That's why I made both the aluminum and the copper sheets over here. And most of the time with those recipes, you only need 1 or 2 machines at a time. And it's so much more efficient to transport aluminum sheets and casings than the ingots themselves. These are both clocked to 150%. Each one outputs 45. So here is the 90 aluminum sheets that I needed. I also just needed 30 copper sheets, which was actually ridiculously easy because I've already done so much load balancing. If we come all the way over here, we drop down. One of the very first things I ever load balanced was this bit right here. It took 750, and I can't remember which amount that I actually needed, but I ended up just splitting it over and over again. And these last lines, this one had 30, and then that 30 got split in half. I think I only needed 15. I think that might have been what I needed out of that 750. That sounds about right. I think I needed 15 ingots and I made like 1500. That sounds like me. But that meant that there was a whole bunch of amounts that I could just take from because all of these are just going to a sink anyways. So I just split off this 30 and then send it off over to the assemblers. This freight car is also getting the Caterium ingots. So if we trace these back, and this is where it got a little cramped. It was going to be kind of hard to demonstrate building it. But I just followed my diagram. So let me show you where it starts though, and then we'll go through it. This right here is a belt of 520, which comes from right down here. Because the factory over there, right on the other side of the lake, hard to see, but I've got 600 incoming. That 600 then did a little bit of load balancing so that I could get 80. And then out of that load balancing, I've got 520 to work with. So that just comes over to here. And then we do the rest of the load balancing. And like I said, I just followed this diagram. 520 itself, not the best number to work with, but 540 is much better. So we're going to loop back 20. And so that's why it starts off with a merger. So this 520 will then become 540. Divided by 3, we've got 180 on each one of these belts. With this 180, we then split it in half again, so we've got 90 and 90. This 90 ends up getting split 3 ways, so we've got 30, 30, and then 30. And then this 30 right here is what I'm going to work with to get the 20 to loop back. So if we split that 30 all 3 ways, we've got 10, 10, and 10. We group up 2 of them. Here's the 20. And this goes back into the initial merger. The extra 10 goes into a merger, which is merging from this belt, which has the 180 from the very first splitter right here, and 30 from this one that we just did. So out of this merger, we've got 220. And then we just need 223, and that's what's going to continue to get sunk, available for a future project. Now if we go back to this side, we're just working with the 30. Split that in thirds. We've got 10, 10, and 10. Split it in half. So now that we're down to 5, we just do a 5-way split to get the 3 that we needed for this line. And then we end up with 297 on this line. And last but not least, the silica. Doesn't get any easier than this. I haven't used any of the silica that I'm making at that factory, so I have a belt of 1125 and 900. I need 300, so yeah, I definitely went the easy route here. Take the belts of 900, split it into thirds, and I've got my 300. And now I have a convenient amount of 600 that's still available for the future. I really thought I had so much space when I first built this train station. Silly me. Thankfully, I'm done with it for now. I will see you back in the Dune Desert. Back underneath the train station in the Dune Desert. So far everything's looking good, and I have almost everything I need. If I take a look at the things I need to plug in, there's basically 2 things I'm missing. The sulfur and 25 reanimated SAM. So let's go ahead and take care of the sulfur first. From this corner of the train station, if we just continue through the canyon over here, here we have some sulfur. And thankfully, this is a pure node. And I'm going to clock the miner to 1200. And then I'm going to belt all 1200 all the way back to the train station. I only need 900 right now, but I do have a plan for some more sulfur in the future, and so I think it'll be easiest just to sink the 300, but already have the ratio split in place. And this is how it came out. So thankfully, not too far of a journey. I have this just heading in underneath the train station, and then it goes up to the logistics floor. And to get 900, it's pretty simple. I just needed to split off 1/4, which would be 300, 3/4 of it. Go straight through that sink, but don't worry, I'm going to move that around. And now we've got the 900 sinking over here. So it'll be pretty easy to put onto the appropriate belt. And then as far as the last bit goes, I need 550 reanimated SAM. But I'm only bringing over 525 from the swamp. Well, I wasn't really originally planning on using it, but I hadn't maxed out the nearby SAM yet, and since I am using a summer sloop, I'm actually pretty happy to be able to completely use the miner and constructor down there. I was only using 125 out of the possible 150 I could make, so I just completely overclocked it. Everything over here is still the same. And then right before it gets into the storage unit, I just do a little ratio split. We take 150, we split it in half, so we've got 75 and 75. You split that 3 ways, 25 on each one. This 25 goes over, meets up with my 525, and now I've got my 550 that I need. And then this merger still has the 125 that needs to go over to my Singularity Cell factory. This right here was a whole lot easier than having to go grab another node. Now I have all of the items that I need. I was doing a little looking ahead. Most of the parts I'm creating here are solids, and that's just easy to work with. Even if I have to send that to 2 or even 3 different places, I'm pretty comfortable doing that load balancing. The one thing that isn't is the sulfuric acid. The numbers on the spreadsheet are great, but hey, I built this whole thing, so I might as well use it. So for the sulfuric acid, we've got 960 going into the very first step for the encased uranium cells. This also has a byproduct of 240 sulfuric acid. But then we also have the non-fissile uranium that needs 180. Now, if those 2 amounts were exactly the same, this would be really easy. To be completely honest, I would just have the byproduct of here, go to that next step, and since that's a later step, it would probably work out fine. I could even add a buffer just in case, but because it's not the exact same, that means that I'm going to have to split that initial amount into 2 different places. And I currently have it set up so 2 pipes of 450. I'm not crazy about how I'm going to have to set up the pipes for all of this. And so I am going to do a slight, but somewhat drastic, rearranging of this bottom floor. I can just go ahead and get rid of these, and yeah, I am just going to redo all of this. This is all going to be quite a bit different. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead a little bit, but let me show you what I'm doing. So of course it's another blueprint. I actually made this in a Mark II. So you know how I said I was just much more comfortable doing load balancing if the part needs to go to 2 different places if it's a solid? Well, there's a way to do that. Packagers. So the very first part of the blueprint is pretty much exactly the same. So the big changes, obviously I'm adding packagers to this thing. The other one is instead of overclocking it as much as possible and only putting 8 refineries, I'm going to use 9. So I'm going to do 3 sets of 3. And the reason is, if I split it up into 9, I'm making 900 in total, so that means each one will output 100, which I do love my round numbers. But the best part is, if you look at the packager, completely overclocked, that is how much one packager can handle. So just having one machine feed into one other machine and the pipe is nice and short, this is an extremely reliable way to deal with the sulfuric acid. Because now I can do any sort of load balancing I need, and the only thing I have to worry about is managing the whole loop of the canisters. But managing that, to me, is so much easier than working out fluid issues and trying to pipe all of this all the way over there and then split it into 2 different places and then having to deal with the byproduct and making sure that's prioritized. I think this is going to make my life a lot easier. So we just have the sulfur split into 3. And then since each machine needs 100 sulfur, it also needs 100 water. So that means each group of 3 can just deal with 1 full Mark I pipe. And then on this side, we have the sulfuric acid go up here. And if we grab a painted beam, we can use it as a measuring stick. And if we go up to here, see that right there would be 10 meters, which is the most the refinery can pump up. So as long as this pipe is underneath it, and to be honest, I think the 10 meters starts 1 or even 2 meters up. So I think it actually starts at like the middle of where this pipe is. No pumps required. So this is the input right here. This is the input, which I'm now realizing doesn't quite work. So I guess just the very ends will have it. The empty canisters will feed in from the bottom, and then they get loaded into the back. And then out here, I'll be able to group up all of the packaged sulfuric acid and then send it off to the main factory. It's pretty compact. I'm happy with it, and I feel way more confident about dealing with the sulfuric acid in the future. Ta-da! Takes up a little bit more space, but this section actually ends up being a lot smoother in my opinion. These 2 belts are the iron and the copper that are running upstairs to go to the copper alloy recipe. And then I've got the 2 water pipes, and I definitely wanted those to stay on the ground, so those feed into the 2 sets of 3 on this side, and then the other pipe just comes in from the other side. I decided to just ditch the half foundations and just use some frame walls. I'm sure they're sturdy enough. Not a lot of room, but the load balancing for the empty canisters fit pretty snugly down here. I'll just need to plug in 900 empty canister line into the bottom one, and then up top, I'll have 900 packaged sulfuric acid coming out of that merger. The concrete load balancing didn't quite fit where it was, but thankfully, I have so much empty space, I just moved it over here. So same thing, just on the opposite side of the floor. And then one of them goes through the factory to the very top floor. And then this line is the 720 that's going to go on to the future factory. Everything else pretty much fit. I think the only tricky part was I had to use the curved pipe mode right here to make sure that things didn't clip or look super weird. Besides looking good, it comes in pretty handy. So this right here is where the Ficsonium and the plastic are going to come up. And I just have a smart splitter to split that off. And then they go to the appropriate floors. The Ficsonium goes to this floor, and then the plastic continues up onto this floor. And the last thing I haven't built will be the water extractors. So I need 3 completely full Mark 1 pipes, and then each of these machines need 195, so the Mark 2 belts need to be 585. So in total, I need 7 water extractors, and I'm just going to nudge this down. That might be a little bit too close to the water, so we'll go at this level. And I need 7, so I think I'll be able to do 3 and 3, and then 1 at the very end. I think I'm pretty lucky, and this is the only elevation that they have to go up, which is less than 10 meters, and then the rest of the pipe gets to stay flat. I don't think I need any pumps whatsoever. I kept it nice and simple, and all the beans of the lake came to check it out. Full 300 pipes only need 1 water extractor, and then the Mark II pipes just need 2. I really like to keep things to as few junctions as possible. I think that's when I've had the best results. The other thing I went ahead and took care of is making a little belt highway, well, I guess belt and pipe highway, over to the final factory. So I just made this little blueprint. It's just some beams, and then the conveyor poles, and then the stackable pipe and conveyor pole, so that I could place these pretty much every 7 foundations, except for where I needed to make turns or something like that. Because that's how far both the pipes and the belts can stretch. And that way I could add some signs and a little bit of decoration to help liven up the area. This will have the dark matter residue. This belt will have the concrete. The 2 yellow Mark 6 belts on the bottom will deal with the canisters and packaged sulfuric acid loop. And then this top belt will have all of the products that I'm making in here, because they all fit on one Mark 6 belt. That is just so convenient. But now I would be on to the very last part, which is doing the decoration, running the power, running the parts a little bit closer, and getting some sinks and smart splitters set up down here so it's an easy and quick clean startup. That would be the next step. If I didn't check my power and see a gigantic problem, so you would think, hey, you've got a whole bunch of extra power. That's got to be a good thing, right? Having extra power before I start up the power plant is great. Only problem is, I am 99% sure the thing that shut off is probably going to end up feeding this whole nuclear power plant. So I think I have a massive problem on my hands. Oh. My entire pressure conversion cube factory is completely stalled. Oh. That might do it. Because if this stops, that means that the Singularity Cell factory also stops. Yeah, that's never something you want to see. So the sushi belts are a blessing and a curse. Obviously, once one thing seizes up, then everything else does. But to be completely honest, if there's that sort of an issue, chances are things are probably going to break anyways. And so this actually kind of helps me diagnose what happened. So if we look at this smart splitter, to the left is the quartz crystal. So the quartz crystal is backed up, not the copper. And same thing with this smart splitter. The aluminum is, but not the plastic. And with this one, it's the Caterium. Well, that took a little while. And it was driving me nuts, so it took even longer so that I could dig down and find out what exactly went wrong. So I definitely wanted to make sure that this didn't happen again. It was when I was setting up this train, specifically this right here, which should have been the easiest of all of the things I did. And it really was. All this is just one lift. There's the one storage container, and then that is coming from the excess for the load balancer. It was simple. And then this wasn't what I screwed up. Unfortunately, what I screwed up was at the other end, I had done the age-old mistake of forgetting to switch it to unload. And I thought that it had only backed up for 1 or 2 trips, and so when I flipped the switch, it would just keep running and everything would be fine. And that's why I never even mentioned it, because I didn't think that the time the train was running and me remembering to turn it on was that long. But boy, oh boy, was I wrong. What had happened was that container backed up because it's only a small container. Because if everything is working right, I only need a small one. But once this container backs up, Then this backs up. And then in this balancer, instead of sending 20, it's going to send 60 because thankfully it's only a Mark 1 belt, so it can't send more than that. But that is still more than what that factory was able to handle. That extra 40 a minute ended up clogging up those machines, and because I'm using a sushi belt, once it backs all the way back to the sushi belt, then it stops the other items from feeding, and then those machines turn off, and then the entire factory ends up coming to a halt. As much as that's a pain, it is a huge relief to realize that it was just my massive screw up, again, that did all of this. There is nothing wrong with the system I built, it's just me not remembering to set things correctly. Good times. Now I can get on with doing the decorating and powering that whole factory. Then we'll take a tour, and then we can finally get it turned on. And welcome to my new nuclear parts factory? I don't really know what to call this, but let me show you around. All of the items from the train are coming along here. I've got my temporary smart splitters, sending everything into sinks so that I can just delete those and the sinks and everything will just head on into the factory. I did rearrange things just a little bit, so you may notice that there's a missing node over there. This one is actually the one going to the copper alloy ingot. And then if we come to this side, instead of this only being a copper belt, now this one is a sushi belt. So it is collecting the same copper node, but also this node right here. I got that backwards. This one is the 391 that's going to the copper alloy ingot. And then if we come around to the back side, just gave it a simple housing. I just went with some glass frame foundations, some frame foundations, and the inverted frame ramps to give it some support. And that way they could be on either side of all of the pipes and give you a way to get inside. I may be able to do this entire nuclear power plant without any pumps. It's a bold claim. Let's see if I can pull it off. As long as you don't count these, which are part of the Singularity Cell factory. We can just forget about those, okay? The concrete meets up here, and then I've got my full 1200 line. And then if we come all the way back here, this is where the final sinks are. Once the factory's up and running, the concrete and all of those final products will be sinking right here. And then this is my little setup for the sulfuric acid. I thought it would be best just to have buffers on both sides of things to give me more flexibility. And honestly, that just means I can have more of a buffer. And if I'm going to do that, I might as well make sure that it's balanced coming out of each one of these. Thankfully, I ended up getting to work with a really convenient number, which is 900. So all this needs is the 1200 belt into there. That gets split in half, so we've got 600 and 600. Split this one in half, 300 makes 900. The other 300 gets looped back into the storage container. And then I've got the same thing on this side. The initial belt isn't connected because this is completely full of empty canisters and I don't want to send those into the factory yet. And I also have an extra industrial storage container with an extra 3700. And hopefully that will be enough. It's really going to be hard to tell until I get the next factory built. While I was decorating the factory, I just set down a blueprint of 2 assemblers. And then I completely overclocked them and slooped them and used the coated iron canister. And then I just set up some storage containers, pulled out a bunch of the iron plates and copper sheets, and those were able to just pump out those thousands of empty canisters while I was decorating the factory. I will connect this to make sure that everything runs, and I'll probably turn 1 full container into packaged sulfuric acid because I think that'll be easier to work with in the first place. And so I'll leave both of these belts undone. We'll get all of the solids running, and then I'll connect this and we can make sure that the packaged sulfuric acid is running well. Now let's take a look at the main factory. If this blueprint looks familiar, that's because I repurposed and just recolored the one that I used for my petroleum coke plant over in the swamp. And I thought, you know what, adding a few more batteries to one more factory was probably a good idea. So now I've got a storage of 27,300, which I think is a pretty good buffer. I went with lots of the full frame windows, and then just bordered them with the good old painted beams. And this is where all of the final products are going on to the next factory. The pipe will have the dark matter residue. The belt will have all of the products from this top floor. And then on pretty much each floor, it picks up a different item. On this floor, it's picking up the electromagnetic control rods. And on this floor, it's picking up the iron plates from way over there in the corner. Once those are all grouped up, they head on over to the sinks over there. Shrinking the factory and the top floor gave me something fun to work around. And I actually really like the way this roof looks better than most of my factories, just because it has the offset and difference in height. And because of that, I thought it would be more fun to put the elevator on this side so that you had to kind of exit the elevator and walk into the final part of the factory, instead of it being on this side where you're just inside the whole time. It just adds a little bit more to the outside of the factory. So let's head on inside. So I've got my stairs and my ramps like I like to do. Don't worry, that wire is temporary, just powering all those sinks for right now. And so I've just got a little enclosure for the miner that's down here, so we can just walk around this. And then this sink right here. So I know the clipping is ugly, but it is temporary. It's just going to be temporary for longer than I like. But that right there is a smart splitter, so that once this is full, which will happen very quickly, it'll just continue to sink the sulfur. Now, I could just let the sulfur back up, but I really just like seeing all the belts flow. Since I don't have a way of being able to consistently sink sulfuric acid easily to test this system, I'm going to be able to test that one storage container's worth, and that'll last, long enough for all the machines to run for quite a while, and I can make sure that it doesn't look like there's any hiccups. But once I turn all of those empty ones into full ones, I don't really have an easy way unless I want to just continue to sink those canisters, and I just don't want to keep making more right now. And so eventually, the sulfur is going to back up, and then this sink is just going to take care of it. Once the final power plant is up and running, then this sink will basically go unused, and I can come back here and delete all this. Everything else on this floor stayed pretty much the same. I just needed to take things on a little bit of a journey in some places, and so this spot got a little crowded. For all of these floors, I've just got the one foundation of a walkway all the way around. And this was the one spot where, because I decided to add that foundation as kind of a backdrop for the pipe and the outgoing belt, this is where I just had to add some catwalks so that I could still get up and around, but I kind of like the view from up here anyways. I'm happy I ended up having to build it. And that can get you up and around, because there are just a whole bunch of belts and lifts, which pretty much all feed up right here and go to their appropriate spot on the assembler floor. That column keeps going to the very top floor. Not too much has changed. The only difference really is where I decided to make the factory shorter. This spot has a slightly shorter roof, but the assemblers really aren't that tall, so I think it works out fine. And then we exit to the top floor. So you get a nice little view of the whole desert. And pretty much all the parts come up from right here. Other than that, not too much has changed. I just did the exact same thing I did for the sulfur for the reanimated SAM. Because I don't have a way of using that dark matter residue, that pipe is going to fill up, and then that reanimated SAM is just going to have nowhere to go. But because I want to make sure that everything just keeps on moving, as soon as it does back up, I'm just going to sink that extra reanimated SAM. And after I don't even know how many hours, it is finally time to get the correct version of this factory turned on. Let's do it. So for this, I think I'm just going to queue up everything. Delete it all at once. Alright, I have it all queued up. I'm going to delete these, and then there's just two last miners, that one and the limestone one I need to switch on. But here we go. The dark matter residue is already completely full. Still backing up with the reanimated sand, but that'll probably fill up and the sink will turn on in no time. And that is pretty much all of the solid items on and running. So let's go over to the final sink, and then we'll also test the sulfuric acid before this is over. Concrete is looking good, and let's see what number we're supposed to get on the other belt. It's going to have 600 trigons, 18 heat sinks, 36 encased industrial beams, 54 steel beams, 108 electromagnetic control rods, and 60 wire. 876 plus or minus 2. I would say that's pretty good. Alright, so as long as there's no belt into here, it's not like these have anywhere to go. But without this belt, they'll just pile up into this empty storage container. So let's go ahead and connect this belt, and then we'll go back to the factory and watch the sulfuric acid come to life. So far, it looks like it's working just the way it's supposed to. It's not having any issues getting pumped up this high. If I really wanted to test this, I could come up with some temporary setup to use one of the leached recipes. And if this ends up having any issues, then I'm going to regret not doing that. But instead, I'm just going to cross my fingers because this is looking pretty good so far. As long as I don't mess up the canister loop, I don't see why this shouldn't work out for me. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being patient. Realizing that I not only screwed up the first attempt at this factory, but also didn't need to build the last aluminum factory or as many singularity cells as I did, it stung a bit. I needed to decompress and take a day off before I got back at it. And even then, I found myself wanting to keep building more than make the video. Apologies for this one being so late, but the good news is, I have already made decent progress on the actual power plant. Unless something crazy happens, knock on wood. The next video should definitely be out sooner. Look forward to that, and thanks for watching.